We're doing this with the light in the room, and so it's awkward. That's okay. It brings out the red, but all is good. Welcome, everybody. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. Be sure to hit the notifications bell. Happy 5th of July, the first day of independence. July 4th was the day we declared independence, but the 5th of July is our first day of being independent, right? I'm just being facetious. Happy 5th of July. Glad to be here with all of you tonight. Thought I would just hop on for a quick stream conversation. So much that we can talk about. Goodness gracious, so much that we can talk about. So much going on. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Give a couple updates on things before we jump into things. For those of you who are not familiar, the way things work here is that I give my opening remarks, then I do a roll call and call you out as I see you, names and locations. And then from there, at that point, I then answer your super chat questions until the show is over. And that's how we do it. That is our 3-part show. So if you have a super chat, I will write it down. Then in the second half of the show, after the roll call, I will answer it. So if you have a super chat, just let me know. I will write it down. And throughout the show, I'll be sipping unnamed water beverage. Very good. Ethiopia. Never captured. Writing down the first super chat. It's already come in. But yeah, there you go. There you go. So glad you're all here. Are you culture wars a result of a divide in the ruling class? Culture wars. Result of divide in ruling class. As peak in 2000s. So on that note, folks, I guess just a few business items to discuss real quickly for our community. Business item number 1, NGOs, foundations, BLM. Business item number 1 is that earlier today I spoke with 3 guests from the Islamic Republic of Iran. 2 women as well as a man who is a professor, an academic, and 2 journalists. And it was an interesting panel. So if you want to go back and watch that conversation, I recommend you do it. We did it this morning. That was, of course, evening on their time, but it was morning on our time. So that was a good conversation. So go and check that out. The other thing is, for those of you who may not be aware, there is a new book out called BreadTube Serves Imperialism, critiquing the BreadTube community and its distortion of Marxist ideology. And of course, there are widespread distortions of what that book is about all across the internet. I'm going to be doing some interviews with folks about the book later this week, but if you want to go get a copy, now is the time to go and order a copy of the book. Just wanted to mention that. And if you are one of our Patreon members, you will get a free copy of the book automatically. It won't come as quickly as you might like, but you'll certainly get a copy. And there's going to be videos soon of the events in Pennsylvania. That'll be coming soon. I'm editing the video of the events in Pennsylvania, so stay tuned for that. 2 pretty good videos coming up of presentations on socialism and Marxism from Pennsylvania. So that's all that's going on. I don't know what that is, Mark. I don't know what that is. That's all that's really going on in that world. Keep your eye on things that are happening in the news. It's a holiday weekend for many of us. This is, technically you get a day off for July 4th, even if it's over the weekend. So for many people, this was a day off. They'll be back at work tomorrow. We're wrapping up the long weekend. Other people may have had to work today. So, just chill with me for the next little bit. I'm going to give my opening remarks. And then from there, we'll do our roll call. And then from there, I'll answer I'll answer your super chat questions, then we're done. So I wanted to open up by talking about part of the Trump coalition that hasn't gotten very much publicity. There was an article about them right before the election. The New York Times finally took the time to expose them. And I've been talking about them for years. But a lot of people are not talking about them because talking about them means challenging the narrative about China and such. And that would be the Falun Gong. Do folks know who the Falun Gong is? The Falun Gong is a religious cult that controls the Epoch Times. Epoch Times is a pro-Trump newspaper, very, very hysterically anti-China newspaper. It's widely distributed. They're one of the main anti-China propaganda vehicles, and they're one of the main fundraisers and backers of Donald Trump. And you'll notice that that many of these bread tube synthetic left voices don't go after them, right? They love to go after Galloway, right? They love to go after they love to go after Christian conservatives. They love to go after anybody who doesn't agree with them on anything. They love to go after them, and they love to go after average American working class people who, God forbid, want a better life or want the economy to get better. Right? 96 degrees, stay cool. They love to go after them, right? The message is that average Americans are scum. The working class of the United States are scum. They're just not woke enough. They need to be poorer. That we need global free market capitalism, and anyone who wants economic development is a fascist. The synthetic left, they love to go after average Americans who got confused and bought into some of Trump's demagogy. And they love to go after religious people, and they love to go after these folks. But a big part of the Donald Trump movement is the Falun Gong religious cult, the people who run the Epoch Times. Imperialist aggression. Nicaragua. So who are the Falun Gong? Well, you want to understand the history of the Falun Gong, you have to understand the history of the Chinese Communist Party. So in China, there's something called traditional Chinese medicine. And these are practices that have been around for thousands of years. And most of the medical community doesn't really accept it, right? You have acupuncture, you have herbal remedies, you have various different practices. This is traditional Chinese medicine. The medical community largely rejects it. No, I mean, there's some stuff, acupuncture, there's some legitimacy to some of that, right? There's some stuff with the exercising and the stretching that's legitimate. But overall, the medical community largely doesn't accept traditional Chinese medicine. But it's deeply embedded in the culture, and especially at the time that Mao was leading his People's War in the Chinese countryside and building an army of peasants to fight the Japanese invaders and to fight the Chiang Kai-shek KMT sellout government. Dealing with traditional Chinese medicine was something they had to do. So Mao, the brilliance of Mao is that Mao was very good at finding a compromise, right? And this is also kind of the brilliance of Stalin. This is also kind of the brilliance of Fidel Castro, the Bolivarians, is that in order to actually bring socialism to China, Mao couldn't just go to the Chinese people and say, oh, these traditions you've been doing for thousands of years, yeah, they're all a bunch of bullshit. If you want to be in my movement, you can't do them. It wasn't going to work. These were deeply, deeply believed things. Traditional Chinese medicine had deep roots. So Mao and the Eighth Route Army, the People's Liberation Army, during the People's War in the 1930s, they made a compromise. And they said that we will practice traditional Chinese medicine, but we will not promote any of the religion that goes with it. And that was like a compromise the Chinese Communist Party made. They said, we're going to do acupuncture, we're going to do herbal remedies, we're going to allow people to do that kind of thing. But we are not going to do any of the religious ceremonies that come with it. If you start saying that the reason acupuncture works is because there's a spirit in your arm and this is driving the demon out of your leg or something, we ain't going to do that, right? Gosh. Falun Gong. Japanese Communist Party. They said, we're not going to do that. So that was the compromise they made. And so traditional Chinese medicine was practiced after the revolution. You had traditional Chinese medicine being practiced in China. And then during the Cultural Revolution of the 1970s, 60s, and 70s, you had a really big effort by the Chinese Communist Party to promote traditional Chinese medicine because it was not Western. And they were arguing that this was what made China a strong, independent, socialist country. This is part of China's unique identity that makes it not Western. There's a book called The Long Revolution by Edgar Snow. Edgar Snow was an American journalist who went to China. There's a section in it called Abortion with Acupuncture. And it talks about there's a woman who has an abortion, and while she gets her abortion, her anesthesia is acupuncture. She has like acupuncture needles in her, and that prevents the pain from her abortion. There's a Chinese government film that was made during the Cultural Revolution, and it was called The Curing of Deaf Mutes, and it was all about how they had developed a means of using acupuncture to cure people that were deaf, right? And a lot of children in China would, before the revolution and as China was developing with socialism, didn't have access to medical care. There were a lot of childhood diseases and such, but a lot of these kids who had become deaf and mute, they were unable to speak and they were unable to hear. Through acupuncture, they were able to regain their hearing. And so there was a propaganda film, I guess you could call it, called on the curing of deaf mutes, and it shows these children, getting their hearing back through the, development of acupuncture. And like the first words they say are "Long live Chairman Mao." It was this film that China sent all over the world. So during the Cultural Revolution, they were promoting traditional Chinese medicine. However, in the 1980s, during the rise of Deng Xiaoping, they changed a lot of things. And ultimately, in the 1980s, the Chinese Communist Party declared they don't believe in traditional Chinese medicine anymore. They said, this isn't scientific, right? If you can do a scientific study with acupuncture and prove that it works, fine. If you can do a scientific study with these herbs, but we don't believe in the traditional Chinese medicine. We only promote scientific medical stuff. The Chinese Communist Party officially denounced traditional Chinese medicine. Well, the guy who started Falun Gong was a member of the Chinese Communist Party who had been the leader of their traditional Chinese medicine program. And he was out of a job, right? Because they didn't believe in Chinese medicine anymore. So basically, he started a religious cult, and he started the Falun Gong. And the Falun Gong's teachings are a mixture of Buddhism, Taoism, traditional Chinese practices. But overall, the Falun Gong's teachings are pretty much reactionary. They argue that feudalism is good, and that China is in decline because of a lack of feudalism. One of the things they believe is that the Chinese Communist Party, it gives women the right to vote. Right? Women in China, they vote. They're part of the political process. They're in the military. In fact, during the Mao era, one of the most popular ballet and operas was called The Red Detachment of Women. It was all about women soldiers, and there was another opera called The White-Haired Girl, and it was about, again, about female soldiers, about a female revolutionary called The White-Haired Girl. So because women were playing a role, they argued this was a violation of the traditional Chinese culture. And they argue that it's a sign that the world is coming to an end. They call it a Dharma ending period. And they condemn the Chinese Communist Party for empowering women. Another thing is that the Falun Gong is very, very anti-gay, right? Some people say the Chinese Communist Party is not pro-LGBT enough. Well, not the Falun Gong. They say they're not anti-LGBT enough. They've called for the execution of homosexuals. They've called for the public castration of gay men. There's people in the group that are pretty vicious in their positions on LGBT issues. The Falun Gong it's a religious cult. The leader of it lives in Queens, New York, and they are anti-China activists. They're anti-China activists. Basically the religion gets back to the idea that you have a magical wheel in your stomach, All right, you have this magical spirit wheel in your stomach, and if you follow the true leader, the leader of their group, you can do, the right exercises, eat the right food, chant the right incantations. When you die, your magical wheel contains your soul, and you'll go to heaven. That's what they believe. That's what the Falun Gong believes. One thing that they also believe is they're against interracial marriage. They believe that if you interracially marry, that the child that you have has no soul, right? They don't have a magical wheel, right? If your parent is black and you are white, well, if the mom is white, the dad is black, and you won't have a soul when you're born. That's what they believe, right? If the mom is Chinese and the father is the mom is Chinese and the father is white, then they have no soul. That's what Falun Gong believes. All right, Anabaptism versus liturgical. That's what they believe. They're pretty wacky. I mean, now, what's pretty wild is, so let's imagine that there was an American group going around saying this. Imagine that there was an American group walking around saying, hey, interracial marriage, people that are interracial have no soul. Also going around saying that women voting is a sign that society is falling apart. Also going around saying that homosexuals should be killed or at least castrated. If there was a group going around saying that, and they were from the United States, you would think Vosh and Thought Slime and Skippy the Bear would be all over them. But they're not. They've basically given a free pass to the Falun Gong because they hate China, right? Pig lice cures Serbia. Post-communist. They've given them a free pass, and the New York Times finally exposed the Falun Gong in the lead up to the election. Like right before the election, they finally did a piece on them, but they didn't touch them with a 10-foot pole. And why is that? I mean, why didn't they touch them with a 10-foot pole? I mean, the Falun Gong is this dangerous group, and they're a big part of the Trump movement. I mean, the Epoch Times newspaper, the crazy conspiracy theories that somehow the Chinese Communist Party and Venezuela rigged the U.S. elections, that's ridiculous. Right? That's what Trump and all of them are saying. You would think that anyone who's really favorite revolutionary song, you think that anyone that's really anti-Trump would just jump all over this. They would just jump all over it and say, "Wow, this crazy religious cult that is, and of course the Falun Gong pushes a belief that's really common among Trumpers now. Which is the belief that communists secretly control the U.S. government. There's a vast communist plot, and that all liberals are all secretly communists. And if you read the Epoch Times, that's what they put out there. American Revolution. Independence Day. That's what they put out there. That's what they believe, right? That that the secret communist plot has controlled the government. Liberalism versus conservatism. Just writing down all the super chats. That's what they believe. So this is revolutionary history of Costa Rica. Just writing it all down. This is being widely promoted. Now, this is a big part of the Trump movement. But you don't hear anything about it from the fake left. And the reason is that the synthetic left, the fake left, they share the same foreign policy goals as the the U.S. government, right? Their enemy is the enemies of American imperialism. China is their enemy, right? Russia is their enemy. Cuba is their enemy. Venezuela is their enemy. Vietnam is their enemy. And so they don't talk about it. And it's worth noting. It's worth noting that that crowd on January 6th was made up of a number of foreign constituencies. right? And that crowd that stormed the Capitol, right? The stop the steal, right? Commodity production in socialism. That crowd that stormed the Capitol and stopped the steal. There were a lot of foreign folks in that crowd. The Falun Gong, the Epoch Times, they brought a number of people. The Miami Cubans, people that have fled Cuba, anti-communist fanatics from not just Cuba, but Venezuela, Bolivia, Nicaragua, places like that. They're well represented. A lot of Shah supporters from Sunset Park. The supporters of the deposed royal family of Iran, they were there with the big royalist, Pahlavistic Iranian flag in big numbers. A lot of huge supporters of Benjamin Netanyahu and the Likud party in Israel. A lot of big Israeli flags. The Korean Unification Church, the Moonies, they bust in their followers, right? So you'll notice, though, mainstream media doesn't talk about that. And it's also not talked about by a lot of these fake left folks. Instead, they focus on American working people because they don't want to talk about the fact that a lot of what's going on with the Trump movement and a lot of the contradictions and divisions in U.S. society right now are rooted in the fact that the U.S. government has cultivated these anti-communist, fanatical constituencies around the world, right? These counter gangs that have been set up, right? Frank Kitson, a leader of British intelligence, wrote a book called Gangs and Counter Gangs about how when the people of Kenya were in revolt against the British formed counter gangs, they were called. Groups of Kenyans that pretended to be revolutionaries, but were actually working for the British. And these counter gangs were used to defeat the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya in the 1950s. It's really horrendous. You ought to read what the British Empire did. How brutal! I mean, it was a